Good morning. Sorry for the hassle. Administrative announcement. I wrote a book a year ago, and I brought some copies for you guys. So if you want a chance to win one of the copies, scan this QR code. There's a little form, and hopefully by the end of this presentation, I can announce the 5 lucky winners. All right, let's go for it. I'll give you just a minute to finish that. All right, cool. Everyone set? I see some people still scanning. It's also available on Amazon. It's not. All right, so my name is Itamar Gilad. I used to be a product manager for 15 years. I worked for Google, I worked for Microsoft, I worked for a bunch of startups as well and scale-ups. Before that, I was an engineer. And today, I want to tell you about what I call evidence-guided development. And let's start with talking about how we develop today. So most of the companies I meet do some version of what I call the planning waterfall. We spend an awful lot of time developing a strategy, which, if you ask strategy experts, is not really a strategy. It's kind of a roadmap on steroids. Then we develop a roadmap for a year or 6 months. Then we turn this into projects with features and backlogs and all this good stuff. So we do an awful lot of planning. And then we switch to execution. And magic. Execution is agile. We can change our mind every other week. We are very agile. We're dynamic. Can we actually change our minds? No, because we did all this planning. And no one wants to go up the waterfall and change the plans, right? That will be expensive. So let's just use agile as a way to do execution. But maybe it's a good plan. If everyone is doing it, maybe it's because it works. Well, no. It turns out no. Our plans are very bad at predicting the future, which is a nice way to say we can't really follow our plans ever. But even worse, when we look back at our roadmaps from last year and the year before, we may realize they're not actually doing what they're supposed to. These ideas that we invested in from the strategy and the roadmap don't really move the needle on the business, on user experience. Any of these things don't happen. And why is this happening? Because planning, the sort of planning we're trying to do, choosing between 30, 40, 50 ideas, which one is the best over the next year even, of 6 months, is really hard. It's really complex. There's a lot of moving parts in the market, in user needs, in the technology, inside our company. There's a lot of uncertainty. A lot of things are unknown or unclear. It's actually very hard to get all the data we need. We never have perfect information. Often we have too much information, but we're missing what we really need. And we need to decide under time pressure, because you know, the yearly planning has to finish, etc. And the tool we use is this, our judgment, our opinions, our experience, our brains, which are incredibly powerful tools. But any psychologist will tell you, this type of problem, our brains are not designed to handle. We actually come up with very poor results as individuals and as groups. And not only that, but our brains also have ways to trick us into thinking we chose the right answer. We use bad heuristics, like let's choose what's in the consensus, or let's choose what the highest paid person thinks, or let's choose what the customers are asking for, which is, you'll be surprised, sometimes a really bad heuristic. Or cognitive biases, you know, risk aversion, confirmation bias, anchoring, we have hundreds of those that convince us that we chose the right ideas. So what do we do about this? There is some good news. Over the past decades, we accumulated some really powerful techniques for research. We have user researchers now, we have data analytics and data science, and thanks to the internet, we can do much more powerful market research, technology research, etc. And that means that we are able now to have access to evidence. Evidence is data that either confirms or refutes our image of the world. That kind of checks whether our assumptions are true. And our ideas are full of assumptions. And that's really good news. Why is that? Because throughout history, we've proven that human judgment, plus evidence is an incredibly powerful thing. We know this from science, right? Scientists use evidence to build theories and hypotheses and to confirm them. We see this in law. A judge will dismiss a trial if the lawyers don't show evidence. Without evidence, there's no case. A doctor, if you go to a doctor and they just interview and they say, you know, I think I will take out your liver, I think that's a bad doctor. They will probably send you first for a battery of tests, look at the evidence, and then decide how to treat you. So why aren't we doing this more in product development? Well, there's a huge body of research and methodologies about evidence-guided development. That's what I like to call it, not evidence-based, because we don't base our decisions. We have a combination of judgment plus evidence. And there's a lot of good theory out there, and there's a few frameworks. And I created my own, just because there weren't enough, and it's called GIST, Goals, Ideas, Steps, and Tasks. I kind of started using it while I was working at Google, and I formalized it more in the last 7 years as I was consulting companies. And the core idea is very simple. In order to drive the change, we need to change in 4 main areas: how we set goals, how we select and evaluate ideas, how we build these ideas while actually testing the assumptions in them, and how we do agile, or development, execution, which is the tasks layer at the bottom. Something needs to change there. We can still use agile, but a little bit with some changes. And that's basically the core theory I'm going to show you now, and it's also in the book I told you about. So let's start with goals. Goals are there to kind of capture where we want to end up, what we're trying to achieve, what's the change we're trying to create in the world. And the way many companies create goals is kind of dysfunctional. What they actually do is do all this upfront planning, and then the goal is, guess what? Follow the plan. Launch the roadmap on schedule. Everyone in the company is like, the hard part, thinking part is over, now let's just execute. Ask any executive, any founder, they will explain it to you. And that's actually a really bad set of goals. That's not how we want to lead ourselves. Evidence-guided companies do it completely differently. They start out by creating models of the world, models of user experience and the user value, and models of business. And they try to connect the two things, and that gives them the basis to create good goals. So I'm going to show you a model. It's not the only one, but it's one that I think is kind of universal. It applies to every company. And it argues, it's called the value exchange loop, and it argues that as an organization, our mission is actually composed of 2 parts. One is to deliver value to our market, and the market includes the users, the customers, the partners, anyone we want to create value to. And delivering value means addressing their needs at a reasonable cost to them. And we want to capture value, because we're not a charity. So maybe we want revenue, profit, market share, recognition, data, whatever it is that we need to fuel our business to grow. And the idea is to create kind of a virtuous loop, to connect these 2 things so they feed each other. And the product is kind of a means to an end. It's the vehicle to deliver value, and it's also the reason for them to pay us back. So that's all good in theory, and you can actually define these things, but I like to measure them as well. If we want to be evidence-guided, we need to have measurable goals. So we can put metrics on both. The capturing value, if you go to your finance team, they'll show you a spreadsheet with hundreds of metrics. Pick one. The most important this year. Maybe it's revenue, maybe it's profit, maybe we need to reach this size of active users. Whatever it is, just be consistent with it. But many companies would argue that even more important is the other one, the one that measures the total value delivered to the market, and that's often called the North Star metric. It's kind of an ambiguous term, and it's kind of confusing for a lot of people, but it's really about value delivered, and it's a very powerful concept that I highly recommend trying. Here are some examples from famous companies. WhatsApp, from very early on, measured the number of messages sent, because every message sent is a little incremental value. For the sender, the receiver, it's rich media. You can send it from anywhere in the world to anyone at any time. Much better than SMS, for example. So if in year 1 we have 1 billion messages sent through WhatsApp, and in year 2, 2 billion, we can roughly say we double the amount of value we deliver to the market. While I worked at YouTube, we switched measuring the North Star metric from number of videos watched per month to number of minutes watched. Why is that? Because the creators, the video creators, come for their content to be consumed by as many people and as long as possible, and the viewers come to find useful or entertaining content. So number of minutes watched kind of measures how well the platform is doing at actually servicing both sides. Similarly, Airbnb and eBay are two-sided marketplaces. They facilitate transactions, and that's basically what they're measuring, how many transactions or what volume of transactions. Amplitude is an analytics tool, and you might expect them to measure how many graphs are being shown, but that's actually not the core value that their users, businesses, because this is a B2B, are coming for. They're coming for insights. So what they are measuring, and that's a great North Star metric in my opinion, is the weekly learning users. That's the number of weekly active users that found an insight in the tool that is so useful that they shared it with at least 2 other people in the company, and those people consumed it. So if you can come up with something like that, that's super powerful for your model. Once we have these top metrics, we can start breaking them down, because they're kind of high level and hard to change, so we can start breaking them into sub-metrics, and even those broken down and further on. Well, basically, we're creating a graph, a metrics graph or metrics tree or hierarchy, and you can actually see there are 2 trees here. There's one from the North Star metric, which is in this case documents created per month, and one from the top KPI, which is monthly revenue, but there is some overlap between the trees. So these metrics in the blue that are shared are very, very important for the company. It's also a way to align everyone, to tell them in a very visual way, these are the 2 main things we're chasing, and think how you're contributing to all of it, and also aligning the business side and the product side. Because if you think about it, it's really hard to drive product people with revenue, because it's really hard for them to influence. So it's good that we have also something else that we can more directly affect that also helps the business. So that's the basis for goals. Once you have a goal, you have a target, it's really important to understand that there are more than one way to achieve the target, right? In your GPS, in a real roadmap, there are a lot of roads, not just one. So it's really important to allow for many ideas and also to develop them in a different way. Ideas come from everywhere and all the time. Your customers will give you some, your stakeholders, your team. You'll find them in research, various forms of research. You'll do hackathons. You even now, as you saw in the last presentation, AI will give you ideas. And all these ideas are competing. How do we choose? That's the real question. So first off, we need to recognize a very sad reality. Most of these ideas are actually not good. How do we know this? Because if we put them to the test in A/B experiments, which is what Roni Kochavi, a very famous data scientist, and many other people have done. He works for Microsoft, for Airbnb, for Amazon, and also worked with many other companies. Consistently, what these results show is that at best case scenario, 1 in 3 ideas succeed in experiments. Does it mean that 1 in 3 product ideas are good? Not necessarily. Some of the failure might be in the experiment. Some of these ideas might be good, but they need iteration in order to get the goodness out of them. But what it does mean, that if you're not testing your ideas, this is probably your chance of success. 1 in 3 best case. And a lot of companies are actually in this bottom part of 10 to 15%. I think that's very common in my experience. So what do we do? I think science is a clue. This is Linus Pauling, he was a very famous biochemist. He won 2 Nobel Prizes, one for biochemistry and the other for peace. And what he had to say is, if you want to have good ideas, you must have many ideas. Most of them will be wrong. What you have to learn is which ones to throw away. It's just statistics. Try more ideas and pick the good ones. How do we do this? So Marty Kagan gave us a very useful term, product discovery and product delivery. And because I'm an engineer by training, I like flow diagrams, so I'll show you with arrows. So from the top comes the goals. From the research or different sources of ideas come the ideas. And then we need to do discovery and delivery. And discovery is broken into 2 main parts. First, we need to evaluate the ideas because we have so many. So evaluation needs to be a quick and kind of objective and transparent process. And I'll show you what I mean. And the result of this evaluation will be that most ideas we will realize we don't want to work on right now. We should park them. They're just not good enough, maybe in the future, but now, no. The other ones, which is a minority, want to move to the second phase of discovery, which is validation, which is testing them in different ways, building versions of them, sometimes on paper, sometimes with users, and testing. And what we learn is expressed as evidence. And this evidence is very important because it enables us to reevaluate these ideas. And guess what? Some of the ideas that initially looked good, after 1 or 2 tests, we realize are not so good. So we need to pivot them or park them. But that's okay, because that gives us more capacity to take on more ideas and run through the funnel. We want to keep these funnels pretty full. Then some ideas, maybe after 1 iteration, maybe after 5, depending on the size and the risk of the idea, will go into delivery, which is much more like a classic project. We'll try to build it to the right quality and launch it. And these launches, I have to tell you, the percentage of success in them, if you follow this system, is much, much higher than 33%. Because you are going to pick the good ideas and dump the bad ones early. And you're going also to iterate on the good ideas to improve them before you launch. So no need for launch and iterate in these cases. And you're also optimizing your resources much better. This is actually a much faster system to get to the goal than the old school system of let's just build it and see what happens. All right, let's use an example. Let's not be too academic. Imagine you're working on a product that is kind of a communication platform for small businesses to talk with their own customers. So to send them offers, to tell them what's on today's menu, to send them invoices, to answer questions, to support them. If the customer wants to know what are the opening hours, they can do this through the platform. That's the product. We have customers, but we have a problem. They are churning way too fast. We're losing customers. And from our research, from interviews, we realize they're not finding enough value in the product in order to stay. They're regressing back to WhatsApp and email and all these other things. So we need to build some value, unique value that will keep them retained. And then someone is thinking of an idea. Anyone can guess what the idea is? In this case? It's a chatbot. Obviously, everything is a chatbot these days, right? So yes, someone says, why don't we build a chatbot to help the small business owner? They're really busy people to answer, to support the customers, you know. So if anyone asks what are the opening hours, the chatbot will give the answer. If anyone's asking what's on today's menu, the chatbot will give the answer. That sounds like a good idea. In fact, everyone's loving it. The managers, wow, this is the big bet they want to make. Chatbots are all the rage now. Everyone's building chatbots. Let's do it. The team absolutely love the idea. We never built one of these sexy projects. Let's just do it. It's in the consensus. Let's just build it, right? Hold on. If you're an experienced product manager, you know this is not a great system to build products. Let's try to be a little bit analytical and evaluate the idea a little bit. And I'm using ICE, Impact, Confidence, and Ease. And I'll start just with 2 parts of it. Impact is, on a scale of 0 to 10, is a guess of how impactful is this idea going to be on the key metrics. What's the key metric? Churn. So we think that if we launch a chatbot, it will be such a game changer for our customers that so many of them will not churn. So it's a really, really high impact idea. 10 is like the maximum that we can imagine. So we give it a 9. But we also realize it's not going to be an easy idea to build. Easy is like the opposite of effort. It's going to take us a number of months, and we've never done this, and it might be expensive, so we give it a 3 out of 10 ease. 10 is like the easiest you can imagine. 1 is really, really difficult. All right. So we did a little evaluation. Still looks good, right? Big bet, let's go for it. Let's start coding. Hold on, there's a 3rd part, and that's called confidence. Confidence tries to guess how sure are we that the idea will have the impact and ease that we think. How sure are we it is a 9 and a 3 and not a 4 and an 8? Do we know? How do you answer this question? Again, science gives us a clue. Look at the evidence. What evidence do you have to support these assertions? And to help with answering this question, I created this colorful tool called the confidence meter. How many of you have seen this before? Almost no one. My marketing in Greece is absolutely abysmal. So yeah, this is the thing I'm most known for, so it's pretty embarrassing for me. I'll explain. Imagine this thing like a thermometer. It goes from very low confidence, which is the dark blue area, all the way to high confidence, full confidence, which is the red area. Imagine there's a needle kind of running around. And it has basic, and all around I put different forms or classes of evidence with weights. You see the numbers going from 0 to 10. And there's 4 areas to this thing. The dark blue area is opinions, your own opinion, self-conviction, maybe expressed through a pitch deck, maybe you managed to connect it to some theme or buzzword or strategy words or whatever. This is all opinions. Sorry, very low confidence, no maximum than 0.1. Maybe in reviews with the team, with experts, with managers, they say thumbs up, 0.2. Maybe you created on paper an estimate or a plan, 0.5. But that's still kind of numbers pulled out of thin air. Then maybe you have some data to back it up. Data may be, qualitative or quantitative, but it may be anecdotal, which gives you low confidence, or market data, which are larger data sets. And then really to get to medium and high confidence, you need to test the idea. And there are various forms of tests. I'll show you in a second a sample. So let's try this for our chatbot idea, right? So, self-conviction. Do I think it's a good idea? Yeah, I'm sure it's a good idea. 0.01. Pitch deck. I created it. It's shiny. It's convincing. 0.03. Thematic support. Is there a theme around chatbots? Oh, my God. Huge theme. Absolutely 0.05. By the way, when I wrote this example 4 or 5 years ago, there was a huge theme around chatbots. Then they went out of fashion. Now they're back in fashion. So just shows you that thematic support is not the most reliable source of evidence. Others' opinions, everyone loves this idea, 0.2. And now we estimates and plans. I haven't done yet, so I cannot give myself a confidence boost there. And there's a category here called anecdotal evidence. If you can see there in the small print, one competitor has it, or a few competitors has it. Yeah, one competitor has a chatbot. In many companies, by the way, that's enough. If the leading competitor has this feature and we think it's a good idea, validation is done, let's launch it. But not this time. We're a little bit more methodological here. So we sum up the numbers. We come up to confidence level 0.79. I rounded it up to 0.8 because I'm a good guy. And now we have a full ICE tuple. We have confidence of 0.8 for impact of 9 and 3. And notice that if you have this discussion, well, I've noticed at least, things change. Our brains that are full of dopamine and excitement to launch this feature have to be confronted with a stark reality, which is we don't really know what we're talking about. All our supporting evidence is our own opinions, what people are saying in the industry, and the fact that one competitor has it. That's not nearly enough to launch such an expensive feature. That's taking a huge amount of risk. So what's the solution? You could decide to park this idea because of that, but that's not necessarily the best decision either. It's legitimate. The best answer here is probably let's try and test it a little bit more and gain more evidence whether or not it works as we expect. So let's do this. And in order to test an idea, there are many, many ways. I put here 28 different validation techniques, which are not all of them. There's more of them around. And they are broken into 5 buckets: assessment, fact-finding, tests, experiments, and release results. The more you go to the left side, the cheaper it is, but also it gives you weaker evidence. The more you go to the right-hand side, you get much more concrete evidence, much stronger, but also much more expensive to get. What the team has done is just this, ICE analysis and a little bit of competitive analysis. You can see it next to it because they know that one competitor has it. So that puts them in kind of the assessment fact-finding that is still not very strong. It is enough for some ideas, by the way. Some really simple ideas that are not risky, you can stop there. You don't need to take them further. But in this case, definitely we want to go further. So we go into tests. But they're doing an early stage test, which is cheaper. An early stage test is just about faking the idea without actually building it. So we're going to use two techniques combined, usability test and Wizard of Oz. And what we're doing is inviting 12 of our existing customers, either physically into a lab or virtually online, to interview first and then to actually experiment or try out a real live working chatbot. How is this magic done? Are we building a whole version just for the test? No, it's fake. We're building a convincing UI, and behind the scenes, of course, we're putting a human, a team member, ideally an intelligent team member, in order to make the chatbot intelligent. And that gives them a chance of feeling the chatbot as if it is a real thing. So, to remind you, this was the start. We felt it's a 9, and we were convinced it was a 3 in ease. But during this test, we actually learned an awful lot. So for one thing, a lot of our users are not super technical. So they are struggling to kind of use this chatbot, to train it, to understand how the hands-off work, to understand how to work with this thing. So there's a lot of usability challenges with the chatbot. Second, some of them are really not excited. And why? They tell us, you know, I'm a small business owner. I know all of my customers personally. They expect a personal touch. If they find that they talk to a chatbot, they might be offended. Or someone is telling us, you know, I'm changing the opening hours from day to day. I'm changing the menu multiple times a day. How do I do this with a chatbot? So all this gives us a lot of room for thought. And we learn an awful lot of new things from the outside, which is much stronger evidence than the one that comes from the inside. So now we can rescore this idea. We can reduce the impact from 9 to 4 because we realize it's really powerful, but only for a subset of our users. So it's not going to be the game changer that we expected. We can reduce the ease from 3 to 2 because we realize it's going to be much harder to develop this thing, or a bit more harder to develop this thing than we expected. But we have much higher confidence about these things. Not full confidence, these are still guesses based on just one test, so absolutely not a final thing. But now we have a much better basis for discussion. And all this initial excitement is now kind of tempered. Our brains, our judgment is also affected by the evidence. And of course, the team can keep going on and on until that point where they can decide with a decent enough level of confidence to either launch the idea or dump it. The last part is actually getting on our bicycle and cycling, doing the work, because nothing will happen unless we actually do some tasks. And unfortunately, that planning waterfall that I showed you also divides the world. There's two groups of people now in the world. There's the planners, which are these people in management and finance and stakeholders, and they really believe this delusion, that the roadmap will ship on time and it will have the effect and it's really important and this is a really good way to develop product. But there's another group of people, the developers themselves, the creators, they live in agile world right now. Sorry for some of the future speakers that are very highly involved in agile world. I think you will agree with me. That in many companies, they live in a world where the promise is everything will be okay if you keep coding. If you just push small increments of code into production, just keep doing this. Just keep coding, everything will be fine. In those two groups of people, there's a gap between them. They don't see eye to eye. They don't understand each other at all, and they don't trust each other. The people at the top don't trust the execution. They know it will be late. They know it will not deliver everything they expect. The people at the bottom don't trust the plans, because they were just pulled out of thin air. They know this. They've seen plans come and go. How do we fix all of this? There's a solution. We put a person in the middle. And when we call this person a product manager or a product owner, depending on which side of this person you look, and that person will make everything okay. That person will ship the roadmap on time like a good project manager. That person will feed the agile machine with perfectly curated user stories and perfectly prioritized backlogs just to make sure that they will work at 100% capacity, because that's really important. That person will make these two systems from different eras function. Most of the PMs I talk to are not so cheerful about this situation. They find themselves in sandwiched between these two worlds. They know they're wasting a lot of time. They know a lot of the things they work on don't create impact. They don't have the time to interview customers, to do research, to do discovery. But that's the system, so they have to persist it. I'd argue that if you switch to an evidence-guided system like GIST, you can work in a slightly different way, also with your team. This is the GIST board. This is a tool I recommend using. Not the only one, but it's an option where you put the goals on the left. That's basically just the key results. You put the ideas you're working on next to it, and then you lay down the steps. And the team meets around this board every other week to discuss what are we working on, what's the context, what are the goals, what are the ideas, and importantly, how are the steps going. If some important steps is lagging, let's help out and make it sure that it works. What did we learn? Which ideas went off the board because we learned they're not good? Keep the team involved, and importantly, send the message, your job is not just to deliver, your job is also to discover, which is a big, big shift for a lot of teams. They might be resistant, but it's important, because they will enjoy working this way much more than the old school way of just working, meeting in a circle every day and launching something 9 months later. So that's my suggestion. I would argue that if you are managing to work in this way or a similar way, you are actually closing the gaps and bringing everyone onto the same page. So those managers now don't just live in this fantasy world of the roadmap, they actually understand goals. They need to be highly involved in setting the goals, by the way. They understand there are multiple ideas, and ideally the team is actually managing the ideas. Each team with its functional area has an idea backlog or idea bank, and they're explaining why we chose these 3 ideas to test first in order to achieve the goal. It should be very transparent and clear. Everything here should be very transparent. And we also communicate the steps. So the managers and the planners, they all understand how we're developing the idea, how we're moving towards the business goal. And if we do this, it builds up trust, which is a key thing. On the flip side, the developer, the designer at the bottom, the data scientist, they are not just working on these minute tasks, moving tickets to the done state. They understand they're working on steps. They need to make sure the step is successful, and the step is connected to an idea. And now, because we take in more ideas, maybe those are ideas that they suggested, because they come up with really good ideas. And this is connected to a goal that they're committed to. So this whole system together creates huge transparency. And I would argue, for that person with the title PM or PO, it also creates a much more interesting role. We're not just kind of herding the sheep, forcing everyone to follow the roadmap. We're actually driving this process of discovery and delivery. We're actually becoming experts at the market and the users. We're actually connecting the dots. And I think that's a much more rewarding way to work. When I started working this way at Google, in the late stage in my career, I really enjoyed my work much more, and I think my team also enjoyed working this way. So that was basically it. If you are interested in any of this at all, so we have the book, which goes into a lot more details. This was just kind of a brief overview. And you have a lot of resources also on my site. So you can download the confidence meter as a spreadsheet, and you can download an ebook that explains the various steps in the after model. It's called after assessment, fact-finding, test, experiment, release. And there's a ton of other resources I didn't touch on, but are available to you. With that in mind, we have time for Q&A. Thank you very much.